when a little girl asked me to pretend to be her dad for one day. I didn't know I was about to meet the family I never thought I could have. That sentence keeps echoing in my mind like a distant melody, soft but insistent. I remember exactly where I was when Hazel Grace, a quiet girl with eyes so full of something I couldn't name, looked up at me and asked, "Will you be my dad? Just for one day?" I was on a flight from San Francisco to New York. The kind of trip that usually feels like a business transaction. Cold air, stale coffee, the hum of the engines, it all blends into white noise when you spend your life behind glass walls and glowing screens. But Hazel's voice cut through it like a ray of sunlight sneaking into a dark room. I didn't expect to say yes, but somehow, I did. My life before that flight was neat, precise, closed off. As CEO of a mid-sized tech company, I had learned to guard my emotions like classified data. People called me driven, focused, unstoppable. But what they never saw was the quiet grief that lived behind my sharp suits and steady hands, the weight of losing Arlo, my son, 3 years ago. The accident was my fault. Or at least that's what I told myself every day. That grief was a fortress I built around my heart. I remember the mornings in my Manhattan apartment. The smell of black coffee brewing from my machine. The bitter aroma that was both a comfort and a reminder that I had to keep moving forward. My assistant's voice buzzing in my ear. Calendar alerts lighting up my phone with meetings and deadlines. But the house was silent except for the ticking clock and my own restless breathing. No laughter, no small feet running around, just empty space filled with memories I was too afraid to revisit. Then, on that plane, Hazel Grace appeared. She was sitting by the window, bundled in a soft pink jacket that looked a little too big on her small frame. Her mother, Isla Monroe, was across the aisle, eyes tired but warm, fingers clenched tightly around a worn book of nursing notes. Hazel didn't speak much. I noticed her hands twitching slightly in her lap, the way her eyes flickered around the cabin. Careful, cautious. Isla later told me Hazel had selective mutism that in many places, with many people, she simply couldn't speak. But, with me, it was different. Hazel talked like I was the only person in the world who understood the language her silence was trying to hide. The moment she asked me to be her dad for one day was as simple as it was profound. I was hesitant. Why would a stranger ask that? But Hazel's smile, small and hesitant, was like a key turning in a lock. I felt something crack open inside me. Something I thought was gone forever. That day, on the plane, I found myself agreeing. A little breathless, a little unsure, but with a quiet hope I hadn't felt in years. When we landed, I followed Isla and Hazel into their world. A modest apartment in Queens, filled with the scent of home-cooked meals and the soft hum of life being lived, despite hardship. Isla was a nurse, working long shifts with a dedication that was quietly heroic. Her hands were always busy, her voice soft but steady as she cared for her daughter, and for others. Hazel was different with me. She spoke, laughed, and shared stories in a way that seemed to surprise her mother almost as much as it did me. I learned about her favorite books, the way she loved to draw stars, the small victories of getting through a school day without anxiety stealing her words. But life wasn't perfect. Hazel's biological father, Silas Shaw, was a ghost from the past, long absent. Absent in every way except when it came to appearances. Suddenly, he returned, not for Hazel, but for custody, to polish an image, to claim a connection he hadn't nurtured. What followed was a battle not just in court, but inside my own heart. For the first time since Arlo's death, I fought for something more than just business or pride. I fought for the family I had chosen, the love I didn't expect, and the healing I desperately needed. The morning after that flight, I sat in the quiet kitchen of Isla and Hazel's apartment, watching the steam rise from a chipped ceramic mug of tea. Isla had made it without sugar, knowing how I took it bitter. Like the mornings I was used to, but softened now by the strange new warmth of this place. Hazel was at the table, drawing tiny stars in a notebook, her pencil moving carefully but confidently. I watched her, amazed at how different she was from the silent, withdrawn girl on the plane. She glanced up at me, a small smile tugging at the corner of her lips. It was a smile that said, "I trust you." Isla's voice came from the bedroom, low and tired, but tender. "Breakfast will be ready soon. Hazel, honey, finish your drawing first." Her words were gentle, the kind of voice that carries all the worry and love of a mother who's had to grow up fast. Isla herself was a study in quiet strength. She wasn't flashy or loud. There was no dramatic flair, just the worn edges of someone who had fought to keep her family safe, even when the odds were against her. Her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, her scrubs folded neatly on a chair, and a kindness in her eyes that I hadn't seen in a long time. She asked me how I slept, and I lied a little, saying better than I expected. The truth was, My mind was swirling with memories of Arlo, the way his laughter used to fill our home. The softness of his small hand in mine, the guilt that pressed heavy against my chest every day since he was gone. That day, we went to Hazel's school event. The classroom buzzed with the excitement of kids dressed up with their families. Hazel clung to my hand as we entered. I could feel her small fingers trembling, but there was something brave in her eyes, like she was trying to hold on to this moment and make it hers. Teachers and parents glanced my way, some curious, some warm. But Hazel's eyes never left mine. When it was time for her to introduce me, her voice came out clear and steady. "This is my dad," she said. The room filled with smiles and gentle applause. But in that moment, the line between who I was and who I wanted to be blurred. I realized then that family wasn't just blood or legal ties. It was presence. It was showing up, even when it was hard. Even when you felt broken. Over the next few weeks, my days began to change. I found myself waking up early to make Hazel pancakes, burnt edges and all, just the way she liked. I started sitting with her at the kitchen table, helping with homework, watching the way her brow furrowed when she struggled, but then lit up when she succeeded. Isla and I talked more, late at night when the city outside was quiet, and the exhaustion in her voice became something I wanted to ease. She told me about the endless hospital shifts, the fear she carried every day for Hazel's future, and the loneliness of doing it all on her own. I told her about Arlo. Never before had I spoken so openly about my son or the accident that took him. The words were hard, but sharing them felt like a small crack in the wall I'd built around my heart. Then Silas Shaw came back. I still remember the day he showed up like a storm cloud rolling in. Tall, polished, and with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Silas had been absent for years. No birthday calls, no school plays, no whispered bedtime stories. But now, suddenly, he wanted custody of Hazel. For his image, Isla said. To look like a devoted father in the eyes of his business partners. I met him at a cafe, his office turf. The way he spoke about Hazel was cold, like she was a problem to solve rather than a child to love. He didn't know her fears, her silences, or the way she opened up only when she felt safe. When he said, "I want what's best for Hazel," I wanted to laugh bitterly. What's best for Hazel wasn't a lawsuit or a headline. It was the warmth of a mother's embrace and the quiet strength of a man who chose to be present. The court battles began. They were grueling. I sat in stiff chairs, watching lawyers throw words back and forth like weapons. Silas's team painted me as an outsider, a businessman playing pretend father. Isla was questioned about her stability, her ability to provide. Hazel sat quietly, the weight of the proceedings heavy in her eyes. But I stood firm. Every time the judge asked about Hazel's best interests, I thought about the mornings I'd spent watching her draw stars, the laughter we'd shared, and the trust she'd placed in me. Family wasn't biology. It was love. It was choosing to be there. The hardest part was watching Isla struggle to keep it together. Her hands trembled during meetings, her voice cracked under pressure. But she never gave up. She fought for Hazel with the kind of fierce love that only a mother knows. And Hazel, my quiet little girl, she surprised us all. In court, she found her voice in the moments when it mattered most, speaking softly but clearly about the family she wanted and the people who loved her. This fight wasn't just for custody. It was for healing for all of us. For me, it was about finally stepping out of the shadow of loss and guilt, about allowing myself to believe in the possibility of family again. For Isla and Hazel, it was about claiming their right to love and safety, without fear of being torn apart. The weeks stretched out like the slow ticking of a clock that refuses to hurry, each day marked by the quiet tension that settled over Isla, Hazel, and me. Court dates, legal meetings, hushed phone calls. The fight for Hazel's future became the rhythm of our lives. But somewhere in the midst of it all, I realized something else was happening. I was beginning to live again. Isla's apartment transformed into a small sanctuary for me. The smell of her cooking, a blend of garlic and fresh herbs, filled the cramped kitchen. The worn couch where Hazel liked to curl up with a book became my refuge on the nights I couldn't sleep. There was a warmth here I hadn't felt since Arlo's death. A gentle pulse of life that whispered promises of hope. Hazel and I had routines now. Morning pancakes, afternoons spent at the park where she cautiously chased bubbles drifting in the air, and evenings where she'd sit close, drawing stars while I told her stories about a boy named Arlo who loved to laugh until his whole face lit up. She listened without judgment, and sometimes she'd smile, the kind of smile that reaches deep into your soul. One afternoon, as the golden light filtered through the curtains, Hazel asked me something I wasn't prepared for. "Why do you look sad sometimes, Daddy?" she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. I paused, the weight of her question settling on my chest. I looked down at her small hands resting on the table, so full of trust. "I miss someone very special," I said slowly. "A boy named Arlo. He was my son. Hazel nodded, her eyes shining with understanding beyond her years. I think he's watching over you, she said. He wants you to be happy. Her words were a balm to a wound I thought would never heal. But just as the fragile peace began to bloom, Silas made his next move. The custody battle escalated, turning from quiet court hearings to media whispers and public scrutiny. Silas, ever the polished man, paraded his newfound fatherhood like a trophy, while Isla's sacrifices and Hazel's silent struggles were overlooked. One morning, I found Isla sitting at the kitchen table, staring blankly at a stack of bills and court notices. Her hands trembled slightly as she cradled a lukewarm cup of coffee. I'm tired, she admitted, voice cracking. I don't know if I can keep doing this. I reached across and took her hand. You're stronger than you know, Isla. Hazel and I were in this with you. She looked up, tears brimming but fierce. Thank you. I don't know what I'd do without you. The court date that would decide Hazel's future loomed large. I remember walking into the courtroom, the sterile air thick with expectation. Isla sat beside me, her hand in mine, steady and warm. Hazel clung to her mother's side, eyes wide but brave. Silas's lawyer painted a picture of the ideal father, successful, involved, and ready to provide. But the truth was harder to prove with words alone. Hazel's well-being was rooted in the quiet moments, the bedtime stories, the presence that Silas had never shown. When the judge asked Hazel if she wanted to speak, the room held its breath. For years, Hazel's selective mutism had been a barrier, but with us, she had found her voice. I want to stay with Isla and Elias, she said softly. They make me feel safe. That moment was a breakthrough, not just in court, but in all our hearts. After the ruling came in our favor, a wave of relief washed over us. But it wasn't the end. Healing was just beginning. Isla and Hazel and I found a rhythm that wasn't perfect, but it was ours. The house wasn't grand. We didn't have everything, but we had each other, and sometimes that's enough. One evening, as Hazel fell asleep with her head on my shoulder, I realized I had stopped running from the past. I was learning to live in the present, to forgive myself for Arlo, to love without fear, and to build a family from the pieces life gave me. The days after the custody decision didn't suddenly erase the shadows that had long stretched over me. Grief has a way of lingering like a soft ache beneath the surface, sometimes quiet, sometimes so loud it feels like a physical weight. But Hazel's presence, Isla's quiet strength, and the life we were building together softened that ache, making it bearable. There was one moment that I'll never forget, a day that felt like the true turning point for all of us. We were at the park, the kind with sprawling oak trees and a faded red slide. Hazel was sitting on a swing, pushing herself gently, her feet skimming the ground. Isla sat nearby on a bench, her hands folded in her lap, watching with that tired but hopeful expression I had come to recognize. Hazel looked over at me, eyes sparkling with that rare light I'd only just begun to see. Daddy, she said quietly, can you push me? I smiled and stood behind her, placing my hands firmly on the swing's ropes. As I gave her a gentle push, the wind caught her hair, and she laughed, a clear, free sound that felt like a melody I hadn't heard in years. That laugh broke something inside me. Later that evening, after we were back in Isla's apartment, Hazel was curled up on the couch with her notebook. She was drawing stars again, her favorite thing. I sat nearby, the glow of a single lamp casting long shadows on the walls. Hazel, I said softly, why do you like stars so much? She looked up at me, eyes steady. Because even when it's dark, they're always there, watching. Her words hit me deep. Maybe that's what family was, being a light in the dark for each other. Steady and true. But healing wasn't just about those moments of joy. It was also about facing the ghosts we tried to ignore. One night, I found Isla sitting at the kitchen table, the weight of exhaustion clear in her eyes. Do you ever feel like you're not enough? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I sat beside her and took her hand. Every day, I admitted. But I've learned that sometimes being enough just means showing up. Isla nodded, tears glistening. For Hazel, that's everything. I began to open up more to Isla, to Hazel, and to myself. I shared memories of Arlo, not just the pain, but the joy. The way he used to chase bubbles in the backyard. The way his laughter could fill a room. The little handprints he left everywhere. Hazel listened. And sometimes she'd ask questions. Questions about what it meant to lose someone, and how to hold on to love even when they're gone. Those conversations became a bridge between past and present, between loss and hope. Silas never truly went away. His attempts to reclaim Hazel faded as he realized the depth of our bond wasn't something a court order could break. But his presence reminded us of the fragility of family, and the strength it takes to protect what you love. Isla and I talked often about the future, about what family meant to us, about the scars we carried, and the love that made it all worth facing. In the quiet moments, when Hazel was asleep and the city outside hummed softly, I found peace. Not the absence of pain, but the presence of hope. The hardest lesson I learned during all this was that love, real love, isn't neat or perfect. It's messy and complicated and sometimes downright scary. But it's the only thing that makes the scars worth carrying. I remember the night Isla and I sat on the worn-out couch, the weight of everything we'd been through settling around us like a thick blanket. Hazel was asleep in the next room, and for the first time, the apartment felt like home, not just a shelter, but a place where love had taken root. Isla reached for my hand, her fingers trembling slightly, and said, "I never thought I could trust someone again." I squeezed her hand gently. Neither did I. We sat in silence for a long moment, the kind of silence that holds both pain and hope. Hazel's laughter became a daily reminder of what we were fighting for. She wasn't just a child with selective mutism. She was a fierce little soul who had taught me more about courage than I ever thought I could learn. One afternoon, we took her to the aquarium. The water shimmered with blues and greens, and Hazel's eyes lit up as she watched the fish glide gracefully through their world. She leaned into me and whispered, "Thank you for being my dad." I felt a lump rise in my throat, the words carrying a weight I didn't expect. "Thank you for trusting me," I whispered back. The court battles had left scars, but they also revealed the strength we didn't know we had. Silas's absence in Hazel's life was glaringly obvious, and the judge's ruling reflected that truth. But beyond the legal victory, what mattered most was the family we had built through presence and love. Isla and I talked often about the future, about how we would navigate the challenges, how we would protect Hazel's heart, and how we would heal together. I found myself hoping again, dreaming again, for a life where love wasn't just a memory, but a living, breathing thing. One evening, as I tucked Hazel into bed, she looked up at me with those clear, trusting eyes and asked, "Will you always be my dad?" I smiled, brushing a stray lock of hair from her forehead. "Yes, Hazel, I will always be your dad." She smiled back, and for the first time in a long time, I felt whole. The days after Hazel's custody was secured felt like a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. The quiet moments stretched longer, filled with ordinary things that suddenly felt extraordinary, the clatter of dishes in the kitchen, Hazel's soft footsteps running down the hallway, Isla's tired but genuine smiles. But just because the court case was over didn't mean the world outside had stopped turning or that people stopped watching. Silas wasn't content to disappear quietly. His attempts to maintain a polished public image dragged us back into the spotlight in small, insidious ways. Rumors whispered through social circles. Lawyers poked and prodded at every corner of our lives. It was a reminder that the fight for family is never just private, it can be painfully public. Isla felt the weight of it most. I watched her shrink sometimes, her shoulders tightening as if to hold in a storm. One evening, as we sat together on the couch, she finally let the exhaustion spill out. "I didn't sign up for this," she whispered, tears tracing silent paths down her cheeks. "I just want Hazel to be safe." I held her close. "And she will be. We'll protect her, no matter what." The thing about building a family in the middle of chaos is that it forces you to grow faster than you think possible. I was learning how to be a father again. Not the perfect, heroic one I imagined, but the real, flawed one who shows up day after day. Hazel needed patience, understanding, and most of all, presence. I began to understand the language of silence, the meaning behind a glance, the comfort of a small hand in mine. And in return, Hazel taught me how to listen, to really listen, not just with my ears, but with my heart. One afternoon, Hazel and I went to the park after school. The sunlight filtered through the leaves, casting patterns on the ground. She pulled me toward the swings, her small fingers entwined with mine. As I pushed her gently, she looked up and said, "I'm happy here." Those words settled in me like a promise. Isla and I found moments of peace amid the chaos. We cooked dinners together, shared stories about our pasts, and dreamed cautiously about the future. The wounds from the past were still there, but they no longer defined us. One night, we sat on the balcony, the city lights twinkling below. Isla leaned her head on my shoulder, and I realized that family isn't about what you lose, it's about what you build. Healing isn't a straight line. It's a slow, winding path filled with stumbles, setbacks, and small victories. I learned that with Hazel and Isla by my side. Our family wasn't the one I had imagined before, but it was real, and that made all the difference. There was a morning, not long after the court's decision, when I woke up to the smell of pancakes burning. Hazel was in the kitchen, proudly flipping a lopsided stack. Isla was setting the table with mismatched plates and tired smiles. I joined them, and for the first time in years, the house felt alive. Hazel chattered softly as she ate, the words coming easier now, no longer trapped behind invisible walls. Isla's laughter was light and genuine, filling the room like sunlight. I looked around, feeling something I thought was gone. Forever hope. But the biggest lesson came quietly, in a moment I hadn't expected. One evening, as we sat reading bedtime stories, Hazel stopped and looked at me with those big, earnest eyes. "Daddy," she said, "family isn't just about being born together. It's about being there." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "Yes, Hazel. It's about being there." And in that moment, I finally understood. I wasn't just pretending to be a father for one day. I was a father in every sense that mattered. I began to forgive myself for Arlo's death, not because the pain disappeared, but because love had found a way to fill the empty spaces. Isla and I talked often about the future, a future where we faced whatever came together, where love was the anchor that held us steady. We weren't perfect. We were scared sometimes, but we were family. Thank you for listening to this story, a story about loss, love, and the unexpected ways family finds us when we're ready to open our hearts. Elias, Hazel, and Isla remind us that family isn't always about blood or biology. Sometimes, it's about showing up, choosing to stay, and being present even when it's hard. I wonder, when faced with a chance to choose family, what would you do? Could you open your heart to someone who isn't part of your past but could become your future? Could you find the courage to heal old wounds and build something new? Life doesn't always give us the perfect family or the easy road, but it does give us chances to forgive, to love, to belong. If this story moved you, please share your thoughts in the comments. What does family mean to you? Have you ever had to fight for the people you love? Your story matters here. If you want to hear more stories that touch the heart and reveal the quiet battles we all face, please consider subscribing and supporting the channel. Remember, sometimes the family we choose teaches us more about love than the family we're born into. Would you have done what Elias did? Tell me in the comments.